Used BMW M135i versus Honda Civic Type R. Rarely are the colors of cars we test here on What Car? Particularly relevant. But it's certainly the case today. Were you to park the two cars taking part in this used head-to-head next to each other, facing opposite directions, and view them from overhead, you'd see something approximating a teiki, or yin-yang, symbol. That's appropriate because these two sit at opposite ends of the spectrum of hot hatchdom. Take the BMW M135i, here lend a sinister air by its black paintwork. Beneath the skin sit a thumping straight-six engine and a slick rear drive chassis, both of which use finesse. It's a subtle looker, too. You'd have to spot the chunky bumpers and tri-color badging to know that there's something about it that elevates it above and beyond a standard 1 Series. The same can't, however, be said of the Honda Civic Type R, whose shouty white paintwork and equally strident set of skirts, vents and wings suggest a vastly different character to the BMW. And so it goes under the skin, too, where there's a manic 2.0-liter turbo engine driving the front wheels, and A+R mode which tightens and sharpens the car up for use on the track. It is, in short, a bonsai scream to the BMW's menacing whisper. And with both of these cars going for broadly similar prices on the used market, it's going to be tough to figure out which approach makes for a better used hot hatch. Best get to it, then. What are they like to drive? They feel as different on the road as their mechanical differences suggest. The Civic is the more focused car, even without the +R mode, which brings heavier steering, a quicker throttle response and stiffer suspension, activated. The Honda turns into corners aggressively, stays relatively flat as it does so, and its steering gives a decent amount of feedback. In fact, the Civic's excellent steering makes it as easy to guide on a motorway as it is to aim with precision at the apex of a corner, although the inevitable shortcomings of such a powerful front-wheel drive car do come to light when you accelerate really hard, because the steering wheel squirms around in your hands a little. Does the Honda handle better than the BMW? Well, the M135i feels very relaxed in comfort mode, which minimizes the steering effort needed and makes the car easier to drive smoothly. However, select Sport or Sport Plus and it comes to life. The rear end of this 2015 example feels more planted than earlier, pre-facelift M135 is, but the steering can still feel too light through fast corners, and it doesn't provide quite as much feedback as the Honda's. However, the BMW's rear-wheel drive layout makes it the more entertaining car to drive hard. It's light-footed and playful yet seriously capable, whereas the Civic is entertaining in a scrappy way and, steering aside, less involving. The engine in the M135i is a peach, too. There are no obvious surges in acceleration as the turbocharger starts to do its work, and the BMW is the much quicker car in a straight line. It'll hit 60 miles per hour from a standstill almost a second faster and will sprint from 30 to 70 miles per hour in just 4.5 seconds, whereas the Honda takes 5.3 seconds. Still, the Honda's engine has its merits. There's a frantic sense to the way it revs, and the F1-style shift lights start to illuminate as you approach the 7,000 revolutions per minute limiter. Blink and it'll be time for the next gear shift, which is more satisfying and shorter in its throw than the BMW's. The car's differing characters continue when it comes to ride comfort. Our test BMW came with adaptive dampers, an optional extra not fitted to all cars, but worth having if you can find it. The variation between suspension settings is subtle, and even in the firmest mode it delivers a remarkably supple ride. That's not to say the Civic is as hardcore as its appearance would suggest. The dampers soften bumps effectively and broken surfaces don't have the Honda fidgeting too much. It feels firm over sharp-edged potholes, but anyone in the market for a hard-nosed hot hatch is unlikely to complain. So, the BMW is faster, more fun in vigorous use and easier to live with the rest of the time. It's also more refined. The Civic's theatrical engine rasp, and the pronounced hiss as you lift off the throttle, are great fun, but at a steady 70 miles per hour the engine quickly becomes tiring. By contrast, The BMW emits an encouraging, bassy warble when you want it to, but just a distant hum on the motorway, and there's significantly less road noise, too. What are they like inside? The Honda Civic's driving position is generally excellent for a hot hatch, mostly thanks to the deep bucket seats that offer lots of side and shoulder support and hold you firmly in place when cornering. However, they do make it quite difficult to get into and out of the car, and it's a shame that the Honda's speedo is easily obscured by the steering wheel. Rearward visibility is, frankly, laughable. The BMW M135i's seats are less supportive at the sides but still hold you in place very effectively through bends and are far more comfortable on long journeys. The M135i also has a high-quality dashboard that's much easier to use, thanks to a cleaner layout and a single central color screen that you control using the rotary dial and some shortcut buttons positioned between the front seats. The Civic relies on a touch screen, which is slower to respond and much more fiddly to use. It's also trickier to see in bright and sunny conditions. Both cars have plenty of legroom in the back, if slightly limited headroom for 6-footers, and while the BMW can carry 5 at a push, the Type R's bespoke rear seats are strictly for 2 people. The Honda's boot is vast, and much bigger than the BMW's, although there isn't a parcel shelf, and there's an annoying sunken area in the load bay which, in the standard Civic, is covered by a false floor. However, you can fold down the rear seats in both cars for those occasions when you need to carry extra long or bulky items. What will they cost? Conventional wisdom would usually dictate that the BMW M135i, with its premium badge, would cost significantly more than the Honda Civic, but that's not the case here. In fact, if either of those cars is going to cost you slightly more on a like-for-like basis, it's the Honda. Whether it will continue to hold its value, however, is a subject for debate, as earlier Civic Type Rs have become quite cheap now, whereas more powerful BMWs like the M135i tend to level off in price below a certain point. We can't say with any certainty that the same will apply to these two cars, but as it stands, the BMW looks like the more sensible buy. In terms of fuel consumption, it's the Honda that has the most impressive figures, with an official government average of 38.7 miles per gallon to the BMW's 35.3. However, in our experience, the BMW comes much closer to its official figures in the real world, so much so that we think it'll actually prove to be more efficient than the Honda overall. Neither of these cars is particularly cheap to tax, but of the pair, it's the Honda that works out the least expensive, with an annual cost of £220. The BMW, meanwhile, will set you back £240 a year. The Honda works out to be the cheapest to service, too. Both marques' dealers offer cheaper servicing for older cars aged more than 3 years, but Honda's works out a fair bit cheaper, and BMW's doesn't actually cover the M135i. The Honda has reliability in its favor, too, though only by a small margin. While we don't have reliability data for the performance models specifically, the Honda Civic range came a seriously impressed second out of the 28 family cars included in our 2017 reliability survey. Having said that, the BMW 1 Series didn't disgrace itself by any means, placing 5th in the same category. Our verdict: for two such remarkably different approaches to building a hot hatch, it's remarkable how close a call this is going to have to be. Both of these cars are incredibly exciting to drive in their own way, both look fantastic, and each makes its own case for practicality and usability. In the Honda, your head will be won over by the vast boot, the lower running costs, the impressive reliability and the two very usable rear seats. Meanwhile, the frantic, nervy nature of this car bestowed upon it by the rabid engine and writhing steering will undoubtedly set your heart racing, but don't think the Honda hasn't got true talent, either. It's a deeply satisfying car to drive fast. If you want a car that never stops exciting you, you won't be disappointed. The problem for the Honda comes when you do want it to calm down a little bit, because it rarely does. On long trips that engine drone becomes irritating, and the ride never settles in quite the same way as the BMW's does. The interior's all at 6s and 7s, too, and the touchscreen infotainment is light years behind most other cars. Which is why the BMW M135i noses ahead in this test. True, its steering doesn't quite involve you as much as the Hondas, and it'll be pricier to service and tax, if perhaps not to fuel. But frankly, there's little else not to like here. In almost every other way, the M135i either matches or betters the Honda's sense of fun, whether it's in the playful, malleable chassis or the thrusting, torque-laden engine. Yet it backs that up with a more mature attitude to day-to-day life, that is to say, the smarter interior, the greater versatility, and that more relaxed character when you're not driving like there's a venomous insect crawling up your shirt. It seems, therefore, that by a small margin, the menacing Whisper is preferable to the Bon's Ice Cream.